Welcome to the No Mom is an Island podcast. As moms, we often long for moments of being alone, but the truth is sometimes we feel downright lonely. The intention of this podcast is to show you that you aren't alone, that we all experience similar things along this mothering journey. If you enjoy this podcast, please stay tuned after the interview to hear of 3 easy ways you can help this podcast continue. Well, multitasking masters, whatever you are doing while you listen to this podcast, we hope you enjoy hearing the story of another mom. Today we welcome Amy. Hi, Amy. How are you today?
Good. How are you?
Good. I appreciate you letting me interview you. Amy and I have been friends for a long time and have shared times in ministry together and have worked alongside of each other. We don't live close by anymore, but we still see each other a couple of times a year. And somebody I count as a close friend and somebody who I enjoy talking to because I feel like we understand each other's lives. And we have a friendship that goes back quite a ways. So, Amy, I appreciate you letting me interview you. And I also appreciate you being willing to tell about your family and the unique situations that are also there in that. So why don't you go ahead and tell us about your family?
Okay, well, I've been married to my husband, James, for 14 years, which is crazy to think about. I just still can't believe it's that long because we're having a good time, but he's a pastor. He's a pastor, so we, live that lifestyle. We have 4 kids. The oldest is Noah. He's 9. He has Duchenne muscular dystrophy, so we'll get into that a little bit as the difficulties of that and dealing with a child with a disability, in ministry and, with 3 other kids. Then there's Josiah, who's 6, and he's my strong-willed child that just, he's full on and he wants to do things his own way. And so we struggle with that. Girl, she's 4, and she's my shy little girl who I'm trying to get out of her shell, but she'll speak to people and answer questions and stuff like that. And then I have Eli, who's 2, and he's just like a wild animal because he kind of takes from all the other kids and kind of learns what they're all doing and combines in. So he's kind of like my little icon. He's like animal from the Muppets. So that's our family. Noah, Duchenne muscular dystrophy it's one of the muscular dystrophies it's a muscle wasting disease where basically his muscles are breaking down and building up, but as that happens, it builds up scar tissue and you eventually lose muscle. And now he's right at the age, he's 9, where he's starting to lose strength in his legs. He's not walking as much. We just got a power wheelchair. He's been using like a scooter that he'd get around in, but he's finding it easier to use the wheelchair. It's harder for him to get up and down. Lots of different things. He just had an appointment yesterday. We go to tons of doctors, so that's one thing that's a little difficult with scheduling lots of doctor's visits. But so far, right now, his heart is doing well. He's pretty healthy. But right now he's starting that decline where he's going to probably not be walking much, if not at all, within the next 2 years. So it's a hard time because he's 9, he's a boy, he wants to do what everybody else is doing. So then that makes it harder with our 6-year-old Josiah, who, they're buddies. They've always been buddies. And, he wants Noah to be able to do what he can do and run and climb and jump and the bicycle like him. So, but they figure it out, and this new power chair goes pretty fast, so they race in the church parking lot. Josiah on his bike and Noah in the wheelchair, and I think sometimes people walk by and they're just looking, because people normally see a kid in a wheelchair and you get a lot of stairs, and then you see them racing, and then sometimes they'll hook up some kind of thing that you put under the car, that you lay under the car to fix it. So they would rig it up with the scooter. They would rig it up with the scooter, put a sled on it, and so Noah would give them rides, and they'd go flying around the parking lot. And
that's so funny.
I just think what people are thinking.
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, you got the handicapped kid, but we make it work. They have fun and they figure it out. And siblings it's really funny how, yes, they fight horrible sometimes, but they also are attentive and know, when he needs help. And just the other week we were swimming at camp, and Bethany had Noah in a couple pool noodles, and she was pulling him around and just helping him get around. And it's just funny how they hone in on that. And I love that he has them because they understand. A lot of kids sometimes don't know, he's walking sometimes, but he's using a wheelchair, so they don't understand. all of the things that go along with it. But, I'm glad that he has a sibling because they, really do sometimes really help him out.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's neat. Yeah, that special relationship. And listening to you talk about Noah and Josiah and the things they rig up, it's like that's such a brotherly thing to do.
Yeah.
To come up with some crazy idea, and you always have one that's like the thinker and the other one who's the facilitator. It's like you got one who comes up with the idea and the other one who makes the idea happen. And how funny to see them doing those things. And it's really special though, because that's a bonding experience for them, so that's really fun.
Yeah.
All right. So what would you say is your perspective on mothering or parenting?
Well, I say perspective. I mean, basically, we live by the Bible and we try to teach them, what God wants us to do and how He wants us to live. And basically, that's how, we form our rules for them. And because it's all laid out in the Bible for us of how, we're supposed to live and, be kind to each other and don't do things to others that, you don't want done to you. And, basically just raising kids that you want them to end up being respectful and capable, like, members of society. And,
right.
Because nowadays, like, so many people, forget it's really important. We still teach manners and respect and how to talk to people that are, older than us. And, I think that's missed sometimes nowadays.
Yes, I agree. And then what about your parenting philosophy?
I think the philosophy goes a little bit with that, but like one thing that I tell myself is like you take one day at a time. Sometimes I get overwhelmed by everything going on, being in ministry and having doctor's appointments and school and just I try to focus on one day at a time, and sometimes you even have to go like hour by hour, minute by minute, and just to get through it because sometimes it's tough.
Right.
It's busy and hectic, and kids don't want to cooperate. So you just have to take it one thing at a time.
Right. That human nature, right, makes things complicated.
Yeah.
Okay, what has been your favorite thing to teach your children or watch them learn? Now, this can be something that's like a general category, or it can be individual to your children.
Well, I think for me, I always loved first when they first start talking and learning words and putting that together, but then also then the process, like everything with language, then learning to read. Josiah just finished kindergarten, and I think it's just the coolest thing when they're finally figuring it out how to put the letters together and sounding it and putting those words together, and then just doing well in school and stuff. I really love watching what their favorite things to learn in school are and stuff like that.
I agree. The language thing is my favorite too, and I really enjoyed it when it was my children, but I find that I enjoy it in other children too. I just love the process of watching them figure out how to say things and listening to them say things that are, maybe bigger words than they are. And I just find it adorable and fascinating to watch how the mind works like that. And then, yes, it translates into watching them figure out how to read too. It's so cool though that our brains have the ability to learn that, because it just seems like such a huge undertaking. And yet it happens over and over. And that's really cool. So that's one of my favorites too.
Yeah.
All right. On the other side, then, what is your least favorite thing to watch them learn or teach them?
Well, I kind of have two things since I have like still younger ones and then some older ones. So like obviously potty training, like I think we all hate, and I'm about to like be doing my very last one. I mean, this is the last one. I'm like, I can't believe I have to do this again, but we're right at the process of starting because we just moved, and I wanted to make sure we were moved and settled. And
right.
Although the summer is nuts, so I may not even be starting until we get back into the school,
right, the routine
and stuff.
Yeah.
But I also, it's really hard. I feel like helping them learn how to deal with their emotions and like relationships with, especially their siblings, because they do, get heated and they fight and it's really tough to help them learn that, because, as we go on, we see them bicker over these little things. And as we get older, we're like, that stuff just doesn't, to us, it's like nothing, but to them, it's like the end of the world.
Right.
It's just really hard. So.
Yeah, that is hard. I agree. And sometimes you're like, that really doesn't matter. Why in the world are you arguing about that? And
Yeah.
But, then again,
Yeah.
I guess when we think through things that make us upset now, you could take a perspective of something not mattering too. So,
Right.
yeah. But I agree, and I find it hard to be reasonable in those moments because it seems just so ridiculous to me. But, there's obviously always underlying things that need to be dealt with. It's never just what's on the surface. All right. What would you say is a high moment in parenting? A moment or, a story where you felt to yourself like, okay, I can do this. And, with 4 children that are relatively close in age, like your children are, and then, with the added pressure of Noah's challenges. So, do you have a moment where you remember feeling like, okay, I can do this?
I don't really think I do. I mean, because I think sometimes I beat myself up too much. But I mean, just like when we're having like family time and like nobody's whenever it happens when nobody's fighting and spending time together and just like when we're just hanging out together, not with any like specific thing to do and just I don't know playing games and I don't know and like I think when each of them was born, you're like panicking, but like I think when Bethany came home and she was my third, I felt really great after, that was my third C-section and I thought, wow, we could do this and I felt like a little bit in control at that point, I think. But I don't know, I think the high moments are when you're spending time together and or even it's funny because I think my low moment goes into my high moment sometimes. But like this morning we had a really rough day, really rough start, and I finally was like, you know what, we're gonna use this as like a teaching. And I have this little thing because we still hang everything up in our new house. So I have this thing that says house rules, and it's different rules that say with the Bible verse like count your blessings and be kind to one another. And like we literally sat and read through all of them, and we talked about what they meant. So sometimes like your high moment can come out of something bad too. And
right.
When you come together and we opened the Bible and we read a few of the verses and talked about it, and I felt like okay.
Yeah.
We can start over, and that's just what it's like. You're constantly going to be messing up and making mistakes as the kids and as the parent,
Right.
So I feel like, you could do, you get a high moment out of even a bad moment. So.
I think that's a really important principle too, is to remind ourselves that, high moments are great and all, but like, what are we doing with the low moments? Like, are we allowing them, like you did this morning, to turn it into something that was a teaching moment that then winds up being redeemed as, something important and, a bonding moment and a learning and growing moment. And I don't know about you, but most of my low moments are just as much my fault as it is my kids' fault, and they maybe have started it, but like my attitude didn't make it any better. And I think if,
right.
In those moments when we can stop and think and reset, because a lot of times I need the reset just as much as they do. And so I love that, like just the sitting down and talking through those things. And then everybody has the ability to think and breathe and pray and then try again. And I think that's a great principle for lots of contexts in life, not just, your immediate family when your kids are small.
Yep.
Okay, so what has been a primary influence in your life regarding your parenting style?
I think it's a combination of like, my mom and my grandmothers and like, it's just like how they live their lives and how they raise their families. And it's just, I try to, you look at different people's examples and I just feel like it's a combination of them because they all had such an influence, in my life. And my grandmother also that was a pastor's wife. And so I kind of call her up sometimes because she, like some of the stuff that I deal with either church or with the kids, she had 4 kids spaced similarly to mine, and so I'll call her up and she'll still, have advice for me and what to do.
Can you think of a favorite piece of advice that she gave you? Or, I mean, obviously they're probably specific to the questions you were asking, but is there something that you've carried with you that was a piece of Grandma Martin's advice?
The main thing about her is that she's not afraid to talk to anybody, about her faith. She just, and, even like the important sharing now as she's a grandmother and great grandmother, when she sees her great grandchildren, like even for her, that's like who she ministers to then, and that's who she shares the gospel with. So it's like wherever she goes, it's just natural to her to just implant that and instill that in people, that what Jesus did for us. And
right.
I think that's the coolest thing about her, because she'll just tell anyone, literally anyone, like the grocery clerk, whatever. She will talk to everybody. And I think that's how we should be, not like judging people. We just see this person and just talk to them and see how their day is, and you don't even know them. And I think that's something I learned from her that also reflects into your parenting, because that's the same way, we should with our children. So.
Right. Yeah, she's a great lady, so I would imagine
Yeah.
plenty of little nuggets of her advice have been useful in your entire life, including your parenting.
Yeah.
All right, what do you do with as busy as you are with not only 4 children, but also all the doctor's appointments? What do you do for self-care? Like, how do you make time or take time for yourself? What does that look like?
Well, I struggle with it, but I mean, when I do get to, for me, I feel like trying to at least get some time to read your Bible and pray, just because I'm constantly like emptying my cup, so God needs to fill it up, and sometimes we could fill it up with other things, because yes, I do have that, like, you go and you sit on Facebook and then you're like, what am I doing? Like, you have that minute, and so I'm like, I'm trying to train myself to make sure that, to do that instead, because God needs to fill us up so that we can pour out to our families, to in ministry and everything, because if we don't let them fill us up, then we're going to fill it up with other stuff from the world. And so I feel like it's just super important. And I try, in the summer it's a little easier, in the morning when nobody's up yet and you get your time, but you have to make it fit in when it's crazy and it's school time. Sometimes it's at night, but that's what I feel is important.
Yeah, and I think that's an important thing to remind us too. You would say ideally it would be in the morning, but the truth of it is, depending on what your morning looks like, that's not necessarily realistic. So, like, do we beat ourselves up because it wasn't morning, or like just nix it altogether because it can't be morning? It's like, no, like, you got to figure out, if it doesn't work in the morning for whatever the reason is, like, well then, okay, where else can it work, rather than just either feeling guilty or ignoring it altogether. And I think that's an important concept in self-care in general. It's like, there isn't just a one way that it works. Like, you got to figure out in your context and at that stage of your children's lives what it looks like too.
Right.
Because those mornings, on school mornings, they're hairy.
And
you're like, I'm tired. Like, the idea of getting up earlier is not very realistic. It's probably not going to happen very often because I'm just tired. So I think that's great. Like, the idea of, well, then fit it in someplace else.
Right.
Okay, so what is a favorite life hack that you have found has been useful for your family? Something that makes your life easier in some way. So it's faster, it's cheaper, it's simpler. Like, what is something that you have found works well for your family?
Well, I have a couple of things. One is, especially during the school year, I have a dry erase board, and so I try to plan out the dinners and for the week and write them on the board so everybody knows what's going to be coming, and then I know what I need the day that I get to go to the store. I know what I need, and it helps everybody, like, so they know what they're eating for dinner, and it just makes it a lot less stressful, because for me, if I start the day and I don't know what's for dinner, I don't know, it drives me crazy.
Yeah.
So, because then you're like, oh my gosh, what are we going to eat? And then I use my crock-pot a lot. The crock-pot is very helpful, especially like when I plan out, like sometimes I'll do freezer ones where I'll I'll prep them and put them in the freezer bags and then stick them in the freezer, and then the day that I want to do it, I just dump it right in. And now I even found, like, they're not that expensive, but I love the crock-pot liners too, because especially if you're going to do a couple crock-pot meals in a week, they're really a lifesaver, because you just throw it in the garbage and then you just have to rinse out your crock-pot. It's not a mess.
Yeah. Makes it a lot faster for cleanup, particularly on those nights when, like, the day has been busy, and then you have stuff going on either at church or with the kids at night, and you have literally like that small window called dinner, And I don't know about you, but there's been so many times when days have been like that. And then I get home from whatever the thing is, and I'm like completely wiped out and beat. And I walk into the kitchen, I'm like, oh, I didn't clean up from dinner, and you're like, I might just sit on the floor and cry because, like you're so
Yeah.
tired. And
Yeah.
so, yes, I totally think that something like that as a little shortcut is worth the little extra to make that happen if it makes it that you can leave for the evening activity having already cleaned up from dinner because cleanup was so much faster.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Those are good. All right. The last thing, what would you give as a word of encouragement to that weary mom out there?
My thing is, I love the title of your podcast is No Mom is an Island, and my little nugget comes from that because I feel like so many times we get so down and just stuck in the busyness of life and trying to keep up with everything, and so we would isolate ourselves. And I say don't isolate yourself because there are other moms out there that are probably struggling with the same thing you are, but you just don't know it. And I feel like part of that too, and finding other women and being able to share with them, and then when you do share it, that's how you help each other.
Right.
But I found out lately we have a little Bible study group that we sometimes meet at camp or at Tammy's house, but find, even if it's just one or two friends or a group, and just find people so that you can vent to each other and realize that you're not in this alone, and that you're not an island. You're not by yourself.
Right.
And even though sometimes we do it to ourselves because we're just so down and out because of trying to just keep up with everything. So I would say that would be my encouragement, is just you're not alone, and don't isolate yourself. So.
Right. Yeah, and sometimes the kids make it hard to get out the door to go to something like that, and you kind of have to just be resolved. It's like, we are going. Because it's like, if nobody else, I need this for us to go so I can talk and feel I can vent and just enjoy the company of those other people in a similar stage of life. I agree. That's been something that's been a huge encouragement to me over the years too. And sometimes I've been the one who's had to initiate it. And sometimes that can be really hard to put yourself out there. And, sometimes you invite people and they don't come, or they're not interested, or they say they're going to come and then they don't come. And, it can be really hard to put yourself out there, but it's still really worth it to do it. It helps so much to not let yourself be isolated. So I think that's fantastic advice. All right. Well, thank you very much for letting me interview you. Thank you for telling your family's story and just being an encouragement to moms out there so that they can not feel alone too. So I really appreciate you making the time for me in your busy schedule, and I look forward to seeing you hopefully sometime soon, maybe up at camp.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, you have a nice day.
You too.
All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us on the No Mom is an Island podcast. We hope that it was an encouragement to you wherever you are in your mothering journey. If you would like to share your story or would like to see something added to our interviews, please contact us at nomomisanisland@gmail.com or send us a message on Facebook or Instagram. Also, if you have enjoyed listening to the stories of other moms, there are 3 easy ways you can help this podcast continue. The first one is you can share this episode with family and friends on Facebook or Instagram. This helps the listener base to grow and allows the podcast to increase in popularity. Another thing you can do is you can leave a rating or review for this podcast on either Podbean or iTunes. This also helps gain new listeners because when people are looking through podcasts, things that get good reviews obviously attract more attention. The third thing you can do is you can consider contributing to the monthly expenses of hosting this podcast by going to the crowdfunding link listed in the episode description. Thank you.